Well, hello, who is interested in watching this video? This is Larissa, and in this video I will review my second Nunofelting experiment as I am testing more and more different fabrics. So this is the final piece. If you haven't watched the video about my first adventure in Nunofelting, trying to adhere different fabrics to a Pashmina scarf, here it is. There is a video that was the first experiment, and here I'm not going to review, but in the second experiment, in the second test, I added a few fabrics and I will be comparing them to you. There's a lot of great lessons that I think I have learned. So let me show to you. This is the back side of the Pashmina. Let me zoom out a little bit so that you have the whole thing. It's a piece of a Pashmina scarf that I was using as a carrier fabric, and the tints, and I don't know if it is visible, if you could see it clearly here, but I laid out the purple wool here, and it comes through a little purpley here, and a lot of light, and also you could see the lines, kind of. I should take something else to point with, but I don't have it, so I'll be pointing with my finger for now. But you could see the lines here, and the character of the fabric has been of the carrier fabric. So the reason I'm excited, and it is interesting, and I think you will also be excited about that, is because it gives us all an idea of how potentially we could use Pashmina scarves. Some of them, I don't know if this one's if this one was even 100% real Pashmina, or was it a fake? Doesn't matter. It was light and it worked great as a carrier fabric. And if I was making a reversible tunic, for example, that would be a great thing to know. The only thing that may or may not for a reversible tunic, you see, it kind of buckles up differently, but it could add actually beautiful texture in any event. So this is how the backside looks, and this is how different the texture here is affected by different lines where I was using wool to glue pieces together. These distinctive lines are reflective of that, and of course, depending on how the fabric adhered, and the bulges here reflect that. So, and the colors too, light wool versus dark wool. You could see the different tints that any felter, of course, who has been doing that for a while will tell you that's what happens, but I am not the one who has been doing it for a while. So now I think overall it was a fantastic learning experience, and I'm very, very pleased with a lot of findings. I will get to a lot of pieces that worked, but I will start with the ones that didn't quite work. What didn't quite work, and it is a mystery to me. So you see this piece at the end. It's a piece of beautiful silk that adhered gorgeously, but here I might have to do a little hand stitching to tighten to button it down there. So and the reason being is because I probably didn't, the wool that I was using to seal these other seams has probably migrated. So that didn't work, but that's a minor comparing to the other fantastic things that work. A mystery to me, and I don't know what forced it. I'm still gonna keep it on zoom, like zoomed in piece. This piece of silk didn't See, it kind of, you could like pretty much pull it up in most pieces. So the piece could still be used. I don't have to peel it off entirely because on the edges it's securely kind of pasted. But I probably would be a little bit more disappointed in this silk and say, oh, this silk is not like too dense. But look, at the other end of the same piece, we have this little corner, and it is the same silk as this one. And look how beautifully it felted, and how pretty this little crinkles are. So I don't know what caused that, because it is to be something to keep in mind. So these two things, couple things that didn't kind of work, and another little piece didn't quite get glued in. But now let me go down the pieces. So these three pieces, I will have to do some manual fixing for this piece to be kind of a complete piece. And as you're looking at the stuff, so the silk that I used, that is familiar maybe to you already, that I used in my experiment number 1, this silk came out better than I like it here, much better than I liked it at the previous experiment, which is this. And maybe because I used less wool, and the wool that I used didn't penetrate this silk as much, so it's not as hairy as the other one, so it's not as tinted. But at the same time, it gives me this beautiful, beautiful crinkle, and the piece is not 100% dried out, but it has a beautiful silky sheen, kind of little delicate shine. So that was very delightful. And the same silk I used here, and this would be a great piece to show you some things that I have changed and worked marvelously. So from the top, I laid out the Pashmina scarf. Then I used and I discussed that in my previous video to this one, when I was commenting on the layout. So I used carded, superfine carded wool, and then I put silk pieces, and I took some superfine merino, I think 16 microns wool, and used it around the every edge, all the edges of every piece, to seal them tightly together, and it worked beautifully. So, and color-wise, it's not interrupting, and because it is of the quality of the wool that I used, it's just beautiful. So another thing that I did here, you see, in a couple of places I crossed that, and I could get it any closer, but see how beautiful it is. So that is what has worked throughout that piece, using this, first of all, laying out the wool thinner than I did in the first piece, and then using the wool to go around all of these edges, all of this, and kind of that added pretty lines in some places. Some might say it could be a part of a design, which of course I didn't, that was not the prime interest of that, but I was able to use even a thin piece of silk. It sticks out here a little bit, you see, but where I pinned it down with this wool, it turned out beautifully. Another interesting thing, watch. So this was a piece of silk, and I used also some viscose fibers and some wool fibers and some even alpaca bunny fibers. Those are sticking out. Just wanted to test. So the wool fibers, they do not crinkle along with the fabric, and the viscose fibers are crinkling along. Let's see if I could find a better example. Oh, here. So this whole triangle, it was a piece of silk, and I think silk and cotton blend. Yes, it is 80% cotton, 20% silk blend. Beautiful, very light fabric. I used wool around the edges to pin it down. Then here I used viscose fibers and I used wool fibers. And I don't know, look how viscose fibers, let me zoom in a little bit more even. Look how they curled up. Oh yeah, that's better. So you could see it, the difference, and this is great study case, right? So around the edges, you could see how well it is holding the piece, even though we are talking about 5 millimeters here, 1/4 of an inch of overlay. Then 2 pieces, viscose fibers, they buckle, they follow the wave of the fabric in its buckling stuff. And then we have wool fibers. They did not buckle. Instead, the wool fibers were penetrating the silk fibers and going down to kind of merge with other wool fibers to hook up with the other wool fibers. So the wool lines are straight and the viscose lines are following the shape of a curly. Naturally, they tend to curl. And you see, watch how they themselves curl up when I use them here. So this is beautiful. I love it. So another kind of fibers I used here was Angelina fibers. And I just used very, very little of them. But they do give a fine little... they do reflect, catch some light and reflect it. It's kind of pretty, very subtle. So these fabrics were... This whole triangle explains the whole concept of the stuff that work. First of all, thin layer, very thin layer of wool on the carrier fabric, on the pashmina, then sticking it, gluing it with the wool around, and tying it down with the wool as well. That worked great. Some surprises I want to share. Oh, since what you're seeing right now, my rayon piece, you know, it, one might say it is very rarefied, right? It's not a very condensed piece of fabric. And here's my wool line, and I could have curled it more if I was, whatever. But it, the crinkles are so tiny. They kind of, I wouldn't say got chewed up entirely, but this piece and another piece of very fine, almost gauze-like fabric, they, at the end, they don't look as impressive as I was hoping to see. This piece, for example, you could hardly see it, it just got absorbed. Well, actually on the video you could see it a little better. It's very, the crinkles are very, very tiny, and it's not as distinctive, and the character is super subtle, and especially on a big piece. So what I'm saying is, maybe they were a little too rarefied. But now what was a great surprise to me personally was this piece is 100% cotton, and it has a lovely texture. So let me just show it to you, remind you how it used to look. It used to look lovely, and it's fine with touches of silver, fine piece of cotton. Used to be a skirt, a dress actually. This is a part of the top of the dress, but it crinkled lovely here. And there's another piece of cotton that I used that also crinkled quite fabulously here. So, and here you could see Angelina fiber. I went testing a little bit of purple wool and Angelina fiber, and it worked great. So, bottom line, again, to summarize, rayon and superfine rarefied kind of fabrics. I don't want to say wasted, but in this mix, they are not as, they don't look as crinkled, and some might argue that that was great. Another fabulous finding for me, and I'm very pleased with the way it turned out, and I'm zooming in for you right now, is this piece. It's a long piece I use of this fabric of polyester. I had this polyester. It's very fine stretch knit polyester dress used to be kind of see-through-ish, very stretchy and beautiful, and it felted beautifully here as well. In a couple of places I did pin it down with pieces of wool. That I love that technique. It worked great. It worked great. And I'm thinking maybe if I pinned this piece here instead of it just laying out viscose, if I used wool, maybe it would have stuck better. So that was a delightful discovery. Another one, viscose, 100% viscose fiber. That was just a lining of a skirt, not much to write home about at all, just a viscose skirt lining. And look how lovely it looks here. It felted. It's a small pattern, but it still looks beautiful and is worth adding sometimes when, and also, you know, there are these gorgeous skirts and dresses. Some of them are lined, and I'm happy to be able to use their lining to best advantage. So not all pieces have to be expensive silks. Also, now I'm coming to the piece of another lining, talking about the lining. That was a model, I think, lining, but also a knit lining to a very fine silk, almost gauze-like, very, very light piece, and a very light lining itself, knit lining, and with viscose and wool on the edges. Turned out beautiful, although maybe a little small pattern too. So thinner fabrics, more rarefied fabrics give us much smaller pattern. And bigger fabrics, I'm moving to a silk knit piece. That was this beautiful silk fabric, also very stretchy, and not as stretchy as the polyester one. This is the back side, this is the stuff. It stretches lovely, and it felted nicely here too, with, you know, wool pinning down the edges. It looks neat and tidy. So I'm going to zoom out overall. So although I think there's beauty in this magnification too, that gives you, but also I like how these different lines look. They add, I mentioned to you that I have not been paying to, I mean, the design element, I kind of tried to make it work, but it was not the goal was really to test different things and see how they could be used in my later masterpieces or how they could be used later in my masterpieces. A couple more fabrics I want to discuss. So actually here, this was this fine light cotton metallic skirt. Let me see, let me get to that. that had this viscose lining, but it's a pretty much see-through fabric, very, very fine cotton. And in in places it behaved differently. I like how it crinkled here, and I did tie it down with this wool around, and at the same time the same piece of that skirt, a different piece of that skirt here, looks kind of absorbed. So I do not have an answer to that. If you do, please share your insights on that. And that was a piece of another stretch, metallic stretch polyester fabric. This fabric we used. So that was a good stretchy fabric, and kind of so what worked, and I kind of I like the way it turned out, but what worked here again is I used wool around the edges and across. I think that allowed to pin it down. So in some designs it could be objectionable to have this pieces, but I think that helps to keep stuff, to pin it down. So I would use these wisps of wool and to tie the pieces down so that they could do their beautiful felting. Overall, the piece was a great learning experience, let's put it this way. I am grateful that I've learned a whole bunch of things. It's not the final masterpiece, and the way the pieces are cut out, the layout, and it doesn't matter at this point. I've learned a lot, and I will do something with these two pieces. Maybe I'll I have a shabby chair. Maybe I'll kind of start using it as pieces of like reupholstering. But this is what I have learned. This is what I have decided to share with you. If you too are a beginning Nunofelter, and I'm a beginning felter and a beginning Nunofelter. I haven't done other regular felting but I'm fascinated, and it is exciting, and it is you never know what you're gonna get kind of experimentation, but at the same time following some guidance, having a little bit of control and making sure that the pieces are not falling off is what I'm after, and I'm ready for other surprises as long as they're all beautiful. So with that I conclude, and sign up if you're interested to watch the results of other experiments and trials and errors. Thank you very much. Have a blessed day.